Hi, folks. Welcome to the afternoon session of the webinar of how to tackle hate crime and protect our people. And I'm delighted to be doing this with the Irish Network Against Racism. I started my term by talking about how fighting discrimination and racism is one of my key pillars. And I've been delighted that throughout the year, there's been many organizations that I've been working with that has helped us to move the dial when it comes to racism, when it comes to combating racism. I've been really grateful to the Garda of their support. Today we'll have Assistant Commissioner Paula Hilman. We have Sergeant Geraldine Greene and also Sergeant Dermot Delaney from the Garda National Diversity Integration Unit to talk to us in terms of what's going on for how the Garda tackle racist and hate incidences, and what is the reporting structure as well, and what has been done through the Garda National Diversity and Integration Unit. We'll also have Dr. Lucy Michael, co-author of the Irish Network Against Racism's iReport.ie Racist Incident Reporting System. So for those who haven't seen it in the news, like the reporting of racist incidents this year has been gone to 700 cases. That's up from 530 from last year. So it's a very real issue, because I know a lot of people say, oh, I don't see it, so it's not there, or it doesn't affect me, so it's not there. But it is very real, and it's something that's getting more and more prevalent. And we want to make sure we can tackle this properly, and we want to make sure we get your input to know what to do better as well. So this I guess this webinar will be quite interactive as well. We want to hear your questions. At some stages, I'll be bringing people in to talk about their experiences and to talk about have any questions. Now, I do have one ask, that people remain respectful. One of the things I've always said is I'm open to conversation. I'm open to dialogue about discrimination, especially racism. And I do understand people have different views, but I do not, and I will not condone any abuse through this webinar. So if there's anyone that is being abusive, we will be removing you. We, however, would take the hard questions as well. So if you have any difficult questions, please send them in as well. So I guess I want to say a big thank you to the earlier sessions as well, because we had a very good session talking about the incoming new legislation on hate crime, the hate crime bill that's coming this year. And that is hopefully going to be a step up from the Prohibition of Incitement to Hatred Act, the 1989 Act, which is existing at the moment, but people have found that it's quite difficult to reach a certain threshold. A lot of people here who are attending would have experienced hateful incidences themselves, would have experienced racism. I know myself and my family have. So I'm very grateful to have these sessions to talk about these issues. So without further ado, I'm going to move on to bringing in Assistant Commissioner Paula Hilman to have a chat with us. So, and also I'm going to move on from that to Dermot, and also to Geraldine, who is part of the Garda National Diversity and Integration Unit. So Dermot, Paula, firstly, thank you for coming.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you for giving us the opportunity to talk with you and with others today, and also to Shane O'Carey from the Irish Network Against Racism, and I'll mention some of the work that Shane does as well with us, which is very welcomed. I am also accompanied, I've just seen he's arrived with us, Superintendent Michael Corbett, who is the superintendent who works in this area as well. Michael has joined us at the meeting, and then you've the two sergeants, Geraldine and Dermot, Geraldine Greene and Dermot Delaney, who will go into more detail about our strategy. And I want to acknowledge the work that they've done in that regard. And really, Lord Mayor, it was just to maybe say a few things before the two sergeants go into the detail of what you want to talk about, reporting hate crime and what we're doing about the diversity strategy. I started in Garda Síochána last year in 2020, and one of my responsibilities is the strategic lead for our external diversity strategy, which mainly is focused on hate crime. And it's been a lot of work has been done in the last 6 to 8 months, and really built on the work that the sergeants have doing to date, and we are really starting then to deliver and really embed the strategy, because we can talk about strategies, but unless we bring them to life, that's what we can really make a difference to the lives of people about bringing to life what is on paper. We're looking at the strategy in 5 key areas. It's protecting our communities, our data, our own people, that's internally, the diversity of our own organisation, partnership and communication. And Geraldine and Dermot will go into that in a bit more detail. But just to put into some context where we currently are in Ireland, and I have read with interest the consultation for the new hate crime legislation and the summary of that. And I do think it is interesting as well. Again, the focus on that is prevention, engagement and partnership working, which we'll into in a minute. But in terms of actually hate crime and in terms of a police service and Garda Síochána, what we currently do is our new legislation, our new policy that came in last year with a working hate crime definition brought us in line with many other international jurisdictions and good practice. And that is by having what is called the perception test, so that a crime has happened and then the perpetrator, there's a perception by one of 3 people, by the victim themselves, by the guard investigating it, or by a connected third person, that criminal behaviour is motivated by hostility or demonstrates hostility in relation to 9 personal characteristics that we have defined in Ireland. In other jurisdictions, they have different definitions of personal characteristics. Ours in Ireland are gender, age, religion, race, nationality, ethnicity, disability, sexual orientation and colour. And the work that then we do, recording those as a hate crime and for the first time a hate incident, which is really important because that lets us know and understand what's going on in communities. But what I would say about that is it's just a few things. In terms of by the time a hate crime is reported, I think then that we have moved out of the integration and inclusion threshold. And I think most of the work and a lot of the work that we're involved in, and I know yourself, Lord Mayor, have been leading on, is how we operate in the preventative sphere. How do we build an inclusive society that is acceptable and the tolerance of whatever background, race, gender, whatever characteristics we have. So we're very much as a police service involved in that partnership activity, how we can then, in terms of education at schools, right through inclusion programs, and we look forward to working in many of those going forward. In terms of the criminal investigations, I don't want to talk too much about that. Geraldine and Dermot will talk about that, about how we're going to apply that, the work we're doing to support victims and support them if they are going through the criminal justice process. But the final point I just wanted, I think is important to mention then, is the partnership piece and how we work with partners, with including the Network Against Racism and many other partners in relation to how we need feedback, how we can help shape our policies, and what we need to do going forward. So we have an external diversity forum, and Shane currently chairs that. And we're really looking at this very much as a critical friend type to us, to actually give us feedback, because we will not get it right all the time. I'm not going to sit here and say we aim to, but actually we recognise at times that we may not, and how we can learn. So we want to be a learning organisation to get that feedback that helps shape our policies, but also make sure that we do the highest level of investigations if we are having to investigate hate crime or monitoring hate incidents that are reporting that have not reached the criminal threshold. So we really value all the groups we work with. There are many right across all the 9 personal characteristics that we have determined to be a hate crime in Ireland. And we look forward to continuing with those. But today is very much about, in terms of working with the Irish Network Against Racism, and in this area about hearing what questions we have from people today, us giving you an opportunity to tell you the work we're doing, and then later on this afternoon to get some questions. But I think I was just going to finish because I know we're on a journey, and we've done a lot. We've more to do, we know that, but we look forward to working with others on that. And I just, as I was preparing for today, I came across a quote. I thought it was a very apt quote, and Nelson Mandela in 1994 said, "No one is born hating another person because of the colour of their skin or their background or their religion. People must learn to hate And if they can learn to hate, they can be taught to love. For love comes more naturally to the human heart than its opposite. And I'll leave on that note, and I'll hand over to the two sergeants who will tell you about more detail the work we're doing within Garda Síochána. And thank you again for having us today.
Thank you, Paula. And I have to say, Paula has been very terrific since she started in working in the area. I will have a few questions for you, Paula. I think there's some questions coming in specific to working together and what are the chances of building communities and also policing crime and rehabilitation. So I might come back to you in a second. Well, I'm going to go straight to Dermot first. Dermot, you sit on the Garda National Diversity Forum. So I'm going to let you go through a bit about what the forum. Sergeant Dermot Delaney and Sergeant Geraldine Greene sits on the Garda National Diversity Forum, and they've been doing a lot of good work in the recent months on tackling hate crime and tackling discrimination. So Dermot, I'm going to move over to you for a few minutes, and then I'll bring Geraldine in, and I will be asking questions. There'll be some easier questions, there'll be some harder questions, just so we all know that will be asked. So Dermot.
Thank you very much, and appreciate the invitation to come and speak today from the Lord Mayor and also from INAR. We will speak about the forum and its work, and Geraldine's going to take us through that. But in the meantime, I'd like to talk about, say, the practicalities of how we report hate crime and what kind of service people can expect from the Guards as it stands. There's a lot of work being done in relation to our diversity and integration strategy, and a lot of the initiatives that we're working on are very, very close to being there. But what do we do? What do we do today when we're the victim of a hate crime, and what can we expect from the Guards? At the National Diversity and Integration Unit, we're very much aware, and the Commissioner is on record as acknowledging that there's an underreporting of hate crime. So we absolutely accept that. And we know there's a body of work for us to do to encourage more people to come forward. And when they do, then that gives us the opportunity to investigate and to hopefully prosecute the perpetrators of hate crime. The reasons for that people are reluctant to come forward and report hate crime, we're not shying away from that either. Some people either feel that it won't be taken seriously, or maybe they've had a previous experience with the Guards that they weren't happy with, and they're reluctant to come forward. And that presents a challenge for us to get out there and engage with people, to convince them that the best way to tackle hate in our society is to work hand in hand with the Guards. And we're not shying away from the responsibility that we have to take those reports and to deal with them in a professional way. At the National Diversity and Integration Unit, we have a responsibility for all external facing issues that relate to diversity and integration that require a policing response. Some of the internal side of diversity, our own people, the human resources side is dealt with by our Equality, Diversity and Integration Unit, and we do work closely with them as well. But at GNDIU, we liaise with the public, with the investigators of hate crime and the victims of hate crime, with our civil society organisations such as INAR and the other representatives on the Diversity Forum and other support services. We don't operate in a vacuum when it comes to diversity-related issues or when it comes to hate crime. We're very much putting ourselves out there to deal with our friends from outside our organisation and to have those sometimes difficult conversations in order to understand the needs of the community and to formulate appropriate responses to them. We work in our unit on developing policy, strategy and operational guidance on diversity, integration and hate crime. And our policy and procedures in relation to the investigation of hate crime are currently have been developed and we're currently just putting the final touches on those. And we have a responsibility for overseeing and facilitating the implementation of the diversity and integration strategy. We're the national point of contact for hate crime with the EU. We we're presenting to the Council of Europe as recently as yesterday in relation to hate crime, and that's a massive resource for us in terms of being in touch with developments in hate crime investigation and prosecution, and taking the benefits from our international partners and applying them to the Irish context. At the diversity unit, we also have a hate crime monitoring function. So we monitor every hate crime that goes on our Pulse system on a daily basis, which gives us a very clear picture of what we're receiving in terms of hate crime, what the patterns that are there are, and that allows us then to help inform policy and policing responses on a national level. We work very closely with the local districts and divisions on particular cases, offering the benefit of our experience in the area to investigators. Every guard that records a hate crime on Pulse, we make personal contact with them, offering the benefits of our office should they need it. So that's basically what we're doing, working out of our office. Moving on a little bit, we'll talk about what do we do when we're the victim of a hate crime or when we've experienced racism in the community. The traditional methods of reporting to the guards are open and available. For example, and I should caveat this with, in a case of an emergency where there's a danger to a person or property or a crime is in process, 999 or 112 is the appropriate method to use. Otherwise, call to the Garda station, pick up the phone to the Garda station and have a conversation. And you should receive a sympathetic ear. There is also our Garda diversity officers, and I'll explain their role in just a moment. Hate crime in Ireland, we have a lot of conversation at the moment, the development of new hate crime legislation, and we hear regularly that there is no hate crime legislation in Ireland. We have the Prohibition to Incitement to Hatred Act 1989, which, without going into detail, it's fair to say is not been as effective as one might hope it would have been. We use a base offence system in Ireland whereby any existing criminal offence that has a discriminatory motive of hostility or prejudice associated with it, we constitute as a hate crime. And as Assistant Commissioner Hilman stated earlier, the definition of hate crime, which I'll go through, involves the perception of the victim of a witness or even the guard. And it's a low threshold test. So when you come to us to report a hate crime, there's an obligation on us to record it as such. There's also an obligation on us to view that crime through the lens of hate. It's fair to say it isn't always possible to carry that, say, into court if the evidence doesn't support it, but we do commit to taking that report, and we do commit to looking through that lens to try and identify and establish the bias indicators that might exist in the case of a particular incident. So our Garda diversity officers, they're specially trained guards and sergeants in every division in the country. There's currently 281 nationally, and there's a very recent review of the GDOs has been undertaken by our office. They don't work directly for the National Diversity Unit, but we work very closely with them, providing training and guidance. They are the responsibility of the local superintendent in whose division they work. Like I said, we support them, and they're trained in all sorts of issues relating to diverse and minority communities and the sensitivities that might be required to open up our service to them. They help build trust and confidence within those communities of the Gardaí. And they also provide additional victim support to hate crime victims. And although our in-person training with our GDOs has been stifled in the last year for obvious reasons, there is a body of work we're ready to deliver to our GDOs as soon as we get the go-ahead.
And Dermot, do you have is my mic on, Graham? Do we have a GDO? So I have some questions here, but in relation to the diversity officers, are they in each unit? How is it spread across? How do people know whether there's a diversity officer within their kind of branch or?
Okay, well, firstly, the Garda diversity officer list is available for the public to view on the Garda website. So if you log into the Garda website and search for Garda Diversity Officer, you'll see it there, and it lists the names and stations of those officers. So they are available in every division in the country. Following our review, some divisions are more heavily represented than others, and that's a challenge for us to address, and we're committed to doing that. But if you're requiring the support of a GDO in your division, that name is available to you publicly.
Okay, so I guess part of this session is it's great to have yourselves here, because it kind of allows people to see. I think a lot of people, when they suffer a hate crime, a lot of issues come up straight away. They don't know what the reporting mechanism is. They have a language barrier, or they actually just feel terrified to go and report it. So it's great to hear that there is a Garda diversity officer. So if someone goes into a particular, they can check online, as you were saying, or if they go to a particular, a branch, they can ask.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I have a question here from Ken in relation to you had a slide there about sports. He was I have two questions that I will answer from Ken. Ken, just so you know, I know you asked it earlier on and I didn't get the chance, but in relation to yourself, Dermot, he said that you had a slide on sport. How do you think sport plays into making that connection with community and helping with hate crime? Because Ken is from the Sports Association Against Racism Ireland.
Yeah. Community engagement is vital. It's vital for building trust. It's vital for establishing relationships. Excuse me. We're a community policing based organisation, and that requires the consent of the people that we offer our service to. Reaching young people, I'm a big soccer fan. I'm involved with my local soccer team. The benefits are clear to us, and I know I've spoken to Ken pre-COVID at the very infancy of a plan to engage, and I hope that we can sit down again in the near future when COVID allows. But I would like to see sport being used by the Guards more in terms of reaching our hard to reach communities, humanising the Guards with young people from those communities, but also educating the Guards and opening their minds to the issues that these young people face.
Okay, that's great. I think Ken's point is that, and your point, it's about building community, it's about building trust, and I think sports is a great medium to build that. And you can see that in different community groups, that like kids who get to participate in GAA or soccer or any of them, there's breaking down barriers and trying to communicate in a different way as well.
Absolutely, and for some young people, the only contact they have with the Garda is when the patrol car rolls up to clear them off a corner, or in that type of context. And any opportunity to change the narrative, to humanise both sets of people amongst each other, I think would be hugely valuable. And again, that'll feed into our desire for people to engage with us, to report what's happening in the communities to us.
Yeah. Okay. Brilliant. Sorry, I kind of interrupted you mid-flow there. Do you want to finish off before I move on to Geraldine?
Yeah. Just really quickly. One point I'd like to make is that although when people come to us and make a report to us, we want them to make a statement, and we want them to carry that through to the courts, and we're looking to prosecute people for hate crimes. And I think that can be a barrier for people coming to speak to us in the first place. And what I would urge people to do is, if you're unsure about how you want to pursue a matter or how you want to proceed, come and talk to us. Allow us to take the report. We will talk through your options with you. The decision to make a statement is ultimately yours. We would obviously like for those statements to be taken, but like I said, that decision is with the victim. The benefits of having the reports on our system, they help feed into our policing responses. You might encounter an issue and you decide you don't want to tell us about it, but then maybe somebody else encounters that individual a week later and there's an opportunity missed. It costs nothing to come and talk to us. I'm hand you over to Sergeant Greene, if that's okay.
Yeah, that will be amazing. Just so people, sorry.
No, you're okay.
So, no, I was about to say to To Dermot's point about reporting, like we noticed with the INAR stats that got released this week that racism and racist incidences are up. It's now at 700 reported incidences, but that's only the ones that are reported. There are many that haven't been reported. Last year it was 530, and so we can see the figure going up. But to Dermot's point there, that some people don't want to report. Some people feel scared of reporting. And I think part of why we have Sergeant Greene and Sergeant Delaney here today to talk about how and to talk about what the work is being done is to make people feel more comfortable to report incidences, and then also so that they can be followed up as well. And like one of the first issues, like I know everyone has it. I know everyone thinks, well, is it worth reporting as well? Or is there going to be something done? Or what if I report it and something doesn't get done? Some of yourselves would know that I get a good bit of what I call crap myself. And the Gardaí have been very helpful. So I have reported it. I now owe them stuff that I have to send them, which I still haven't yet. But they have been very good in making sure to follow up. And this is what I'm trying to convey to the audience, is that if you know someone, or if you yourself happens to be someone subjected to a hate crime, do report it, because these things do need to be transparent, do need to be reported so that it can be recorded, and then it can be dealt with as well. And with that, I move on to Sergeant Greene, who will go through a bit of the commitments of the Diversity and Integration Strategy that was launched in October 2019. Sergeant Greene.
Thank you very much. And thank you for inviting us here today. I'll just follow on from what Dermot was saying really about the hate crime definition. And that was introduced in our hate crime strategy that we launched about a year and a half ago. And I'll just skip back to it there for any of you who are not familiar with it. I know we've touched on it. Any non-crime, that's the non-crime hate incident. We have two different definitions. One is for hate crime, one is for non-crime hate incidents. And I think it's very important today to emphasise that both of them, we will deal with both of them. If an incident doesn't reach the threshold of a criminal offence, we will still take that report from you, and it's important that people know that. So the definitions include all the protected characteristics that the Assistant Commissioner mentioned: age, disability, race, colour, nationality, ethnicity, religion, sexual orientation and gender. Obviously with the new hate crime legislation that may be revised, but we will deal with that when it comes. So just to move on to the actual diversity and integration strategy, which was launched in Balbriggan in October of 19. A number of the initiatives that are listed are being carried out through initiatives in our office, and a lot of them are almost at fruition and just requiring some final signatures to get them out there. So I'll just go through a few of them. To encourage and facilitate reporting of hate crime. And to do that, we have developed an online reporting system for hate crime, and that is fully developed and ready to go, and that will be happening in the next few weeks, I imagine, or month. Also, third-party referral for hate crime. So that will allow somebody who maybe doesn't feel confident either in ourselves or the system to come to us, to report to us for whatever reason, to allow somebody else to do that for them. And we will deal with those through our office and have them investigated and dealt with properly. We also carried out a full review of the current diversity training that existed, and we used external independent experts in this area. This wasn't something that was carried out internally. We also undertook to monitor and respond to hate crime, and we do that, like Dermot said, by monitoring everything that occurs and is reported to us. And I think, as the Lord Mayor said, not everything is reported to the guards, and we would encourage you to come forward and report to us in as much as you can.
Geraldine, I'm just going to stop you there for a second, because you mentioned it and then you kind of went on to the next thing, but it's really important, because when I heard it on the diversity forum, I was kind of thinking, oh, this this could be great, the online reporting for hate crime,
Yeah.
because we do have a whole cohort of perhaps younger people who would never dream of entering the Garda station. So as Dermot said, normally when you see a Garda car, you're scared of it and you run away. So like the online reporting system, can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, that is exactly one of the reasons, and also for people that may feel not comfortable or may, for whatever reason, would prefer not they might not want to remain anonymous, and we'll accept those reports as well. It's a safe environment. We're in a digital age where it's more common for that kind of a service to be available, and we would hope that would encourage people to report it. It's an easy and a quick way. There's a couple of easy steps. Just you provide the minimum information with your details, and we'll make contact with you with your permission from our office, and we will ensure then that it's followed through, to the local Garda station that's relevant to you.
Yeah, and Shay has a question here that ties into another one of your points of developing training to increase expertise. Shay's point is, what will be done to make sure that Gardaí are trained properly to recognise or perceive hate crimes? So is this part of...
I'm actually going to come on to that.
Okay, great.
In just a moment, so I will address that, and I'll just say at the onset, the hate crime training will be mandatory for everybody in the organisation. There's certain learning pathways in it for different groups, and I'll touch on that if you want me to move on to that now.
No, I think sorry for interrupting.
No, that's
your
okay.
flow, so.
Just in relation to a lot of these, we have developed policy and procedures that have fallen out of our strategy, and a lot of that, what's in that, is setting out what we are planning to do. What's our response? They're actually called responding to hate crime. So it's the Garda's response to hate crime, and that is across all areas, from taking a report to training our people. So it covers everything. So they're almost ready for approval and sign off for the organisation. And once that's done, all of the other things that I'm mentioning here will follow. So we need to have those solidly in place. So the actual hate crime training is probably one of the biggest things that we've undertaken, and a lot of what we did beforehand was consultation both with all our civil society organisations. We talked to victims groups, we talked to people that wanted to have their voice heard. And I just want to stress, this is the diversity and integration strategy we're talking about. It's not the strategy statement for the Guards. It's not the national policing plan. So people have maybe criticised it and said that it doesn't address all areas of communities. It is particularly aimed at diverse and minority communities. So that's what this is about. I'll just say that part of the strategy, or part of the strategy, said that we would develop a forum, a national diversity forum, and we have done that. It's in place now for almost a year, and the Lord Mayor kindly sits on it as a recurring invited guest. I'll call her. She's a regular member as an invited guest, and also the policing authority are an invited guest. So we have a two-way relationship with the forum, in that their job is to oversee the implementation of the strategy and to make sure that we're keeping on track and doing what we say we're going to do. But also, they're like a communication link for us too. They're a critical friend to us. We can use them as a way to reach wider communities. They can come to us with the issues that they have referred to them from their communities. So it's an absolutely excellent forum. It's probably one of the most innovative things we've done in a long time in terms of getting everybody around the same table and being open and transparent about what we're doing. Does that cover what you were going to ask about the forum?
Yeah, it was more about the training, and I think one of another question, because I think Shay's point was in relation to kind of training and how it's happening, but you already answered in terms of it's coming along now. Yeah, so,
I'll move on to that. One of the earlier questions was about the forum. The training, we have 3 different modules of training coming. The first one, which is ready from, I think the 31st is the handover date from the developers of the training to An Garda Síochána, and from that date then we will start getting it on the platform in the Garda College to get it delivered to the whole organisation. So the first part of the training is the hate crime, like I said. We also then have diversity and cultural awareness training, And following on from that, we have additional training for our managers in dealing with diversity in policing from a management perspective. Then we also have a full review and evaluation of all of the training and the strategy, and that will be independently done by Dublin City University. And I'll move on to the actual training itself, and I'll just say as well that the developers have identified where the gaps were, because the review was carried out and we saw where we needed, my slides keep moving here by themselves, it was identified what we needed. So there was a lot of training is needed, and we absolutely hold our hands up to that. And we will say that, as Dermot mentioned at the beginning, there's a lot that we still need to do. So I'll just start in relation to the actual training itself. The first module is about the nature and the impact of hate crime and the importance of recording. And Dermot touched on that, but I'll just say hate crime, it's different from other crimes. It's different in that it's an attack on who you are. It's an attack on something about you that you cannot change or that you should not have to change. And it's also a signal crime. And by that we mean it sends a signal not just to the victim but also to the wider community. It puts people in fear of maybe a similar event or attack happening to them. So there's a huge repercussion from hate crime, and research is very, very clear about the impact and the long-lasting impact of hate crime on victims and their families and communities. And this is our commitment to making changes in that area by showing the training that we're doing. So the second module of the training is identifying and recording hate crime. And Dermot touched on that. There's a lot of work to be done in educating our members, from call takers right through to investigators and prosecutors. And all of this is covered in the training. Obviously, I'm not going to go into all of that in detail, but that from next week, we're reviewing the actual content. It's at that stage of development, it's finished. And we have the pathways into the types of, say, the level of detail for call takers is different to somebody who's prosecuting. So everybody will be doing it, but at different levels. All civilian staff will also do it, but not to the same degree. So I'll just move on again, if my slides will let me.
I was a bit to say your slides are going a bit all over the place at the moment.
Now, but that's okay. The third module is in relation to community engagement and assessing risk. And with that, we look at the Garda decision-making model, is what we use when we're making any kind of decisions. And for hate crime, we're very focused on the constitutional rights, the human rights of the person and what's been violated. And that's a very strong focus for us. So just some of the learning objectives I see on my slide: to explore effective communication with effective communities and apply the risk elements of the Garda decision-making model in all hate crime incidents. So if it lets me, I'll move on to number 4 is the investigation and the prosecution issues. And this is where additional training will be available for people that are prosecuting and investigating crime. And we have lots of contributions in all of the training from different people. But in this part, we have a detective sergeant speaking about the process of investigating hate crime. And just to stress as well, investigating hate crime is the same as investigating from an investigator's perspective of any kind of serious incident. There's no fear to be had around taking reports, following it through. We investigate an assault the same way as we investigate an assault that has a hate-related motive. We just recognise that the victim may need different services, may need different attention, and we acknowledge all those things. But in terms of the difficulty of investigating, there is no difficulty with investigating a hate-related, either a crime or an incident. And that's very important to stress. So people that may fear that their incident may not be dealt with seriously, that's not the case. We will take all reports of crime and non-crime where there's a hate motive. The other thing that you touched on earlier, actually, Lord Mayor, about the online reporting, that is something that is going to hopefully change the reporting of hate crime into the future, and that it will increase reporting, and that's what we want. We acknowledge the increase of the numbers in the INR report, and we welcome increase in reporting, and that for us is it shows the level of confidence maybe in the Gardaí, in that the 13% increase in the amount that are being reported to us up on last year, which is a positive thing. I know it also is a reflection on the number of hate crimes, which is a negative thing, unfortunately, but to have people instill confidence and to have that, that's what we want going forward, is that come to us and we will take the report from you.
Well, I also, like, in fairness, Geraldine, I think it's also the data being gathered means that it's more reflective of what's happening in society, and
Yes.
and being able to have that data will be crucial in actually pushing the conversation and getting something done about it, because when people don't think it's happening and when it's not being reported and when there's not actual stats that reflect what's happening in society, there isn't a will to change it. People would just say, well, it's not really happening, so we don't have to do anything about it. So there is, I think there's a question there. You talked about the great work about diversity and diversity training. What about diversity within, and maybe something I asked Assistant Commissioner Hilman or Superintendent, but diversity within the Gardaí, of having more, I guess, diversity within the force itself. What are your thoughts? So
I've lots of thoughts. It's just Assistant Commissioner is going to talk on that.
Oh, okay. I'll come back to you in a second, Paula, about it. So,
Does she want to come in?
Do you want to come in, or?
What, do you want me to come in now, or do you want to come
Oh, no, I'll finish off with Geraldine, and I'll come back in then with
Okay.
yeah.
No, just to say that the diversity and inclusion strategy is finishing in conjunction with the end of our strategy in 2021, the end of this year, to allow us to combine both strategies.
Okay.
So we're, I suppose, from an outward-facing element is what we deal with, but we also deal with our people in terms of their training, not so much in terms of, say, the numbers that constitute, different groups within the Guard. So that's not something that our unit would deal with, but we would, going forward, it would be a combined strategy.
Okay.
And I do think that more representation from diverse groups will increase confidence in reporting as well.
And well, you can't be what you can't see, and part of the you can't be what you can't see is that you
Exactly.
can't relate also when you can't see it. So
Exactly.
for people wondering why we keep on looking to our left and right, it's because Geraldine is like 3 meters apart from me here at the moment. So it's like we're having a conversation. Geraldine, there is a question. It's gone now. Shane had it there for me, but it was talking about how people, when reporting, how can it be guaranteed that their immigration status won't hinder their reporting of a hate crime? Because I think there is a lot of fear about that.
Okay, I think that's something that has been talked about, and I believe the Minister has given assurances that people will not be deported during COVID, certainly. I would always say that a victim is a victim first, and that's what we will deal with. We're not interested in your status in the country. Please don't let that be a barrier to coming forward to report any type of crime. If you are a victim, that's what we will look at first. So don't worry about that.
Mm-hmm. Great. Okay. All right. I'll skip through, aside from the weather structure. Oh, yeah, I'll ask that one of ourselves, of Lucy, perhaps next. So there was a question from Tin, and this is I guess a slightly kind of more subjective question, but she is right in so far she represents a lot of people through her organisation, in that she has recently noticed a lot of increase of Asian hate, and that when she reports, some individuals say that when they report the crime that they don't get any feedback from it, and it's not until she has to raise it to a different level. Is there a follow-up system that people can see where they are, the crimes, the report is, and to be able to follow up so they don't feel like they are, I guess, that the door is shut on their face?
Okay, I think that's a very good point. In relation to victims of crime, we have the Victims of Crime Act, we have EU directives that set out the follow-up that's required of us with victims. But in terms of maybe an incident where it is not a criminal offence, that type of thing that you might be talking about, we don't have those same structures in place, and it's probably an area that we need to maybe put something more solid in place. But definitely we would be, from our office, certainly when we get referrals in, we would always make sure that there's a follow-up. When we liaise with the local districts, local superintendents' offices, we would make sure that there's follow-up. And where we can, as a small unit, we would do that follow-up as well. But where it's not in the criminal justice process, it's not as formalised, but it's certainly something that we would be encouraging.
Okay, we're going to ask a good few more questions as we go through the Q&As and the Q&A part of the session. So I'm Sergeant Greene. Do you want to continue on the presentation?
No,
or?
it's okay. I think the training part is probably the biggest part that we have in terms of increasing confidence in our own staff and our own members to investigate, which will equally instill a confidence, I think, in the public to report to us.
Yeah.
And the different modules that are there, there's a huge contribution from civil society organisations where we have, and I touched on this, we have the voices of victims talking about their experiences of discrimination and everything from homophobic incidents, everything, anti-Semitism. We've covered all the different strands of diversity, and we've looked at the bias indicators that we need to look out for as investigators, but also the human element and what we need to do to learn about how to deal with victims that are from these particular communities. And that's why we thought it was so important to have that input from all those people. This is not about the guards looking at what we think you need. We went out there and we asked, and we had consultation days. We have our forums. We have lots of different platforms now to get those voices heard. And as I said at the start, this is about diverse communities. It's not about all of society. It's about diverse communities. So we really, really want to emphasise that, is that we listened, we took on board, we have your input in our training. Your voices will be heard, and that's, I think, the greatest way to learn is to hear those personal experiences and that human element.
Yep. Geraldine, before you go, last question, I guess, is that Dermot had talked about the GDO, the Garda Diversity Officer. What happens, James was asking online here, what happens if the GDO isn't there? Who is there, and what does An Garda Síochána have in place? And is it with organisations like the Irish Network Against Racism, where there is a support even when their GDO isn't there, or how is it going to take place?
I think Dermot touched on that some divisions would have a lot, some not so many, but there is a representation right across the country in every division. However, if you cannot contact a Garda Diversity Officer, I would say contact us. If it's an emergency, 999, but there's always that option to contact our office at diversity@garda.ie, and we'll put you in touch with the local, we will put you in touch with the right person. But diversity officers would sit in the community policing section, and somebody in a community policing unit can help. All diversity officers probably started out as community policing to start with, and that's where they're nearly all based, is it within a community policing unit. But we will find somebody to deal with you if it means you coming directly to us. We'll do that.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you so much, Sergeant Greene. And we're going to move on to our next few speakers before we come back in on questions. That will be a live Q&A question. Are you okay with that?
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sergeant Greene. I'm going to move on to Lucy and Aga from INAR. Lucy is, sorry, I actually didn't go through all our panellists. Lucy Michael, co-author of the Irish Network Against Racism, iReport.ie, Racist Incident Reporting System. Aga Wisk, Communications and Membership Development Officer in the Irish Network Against Racism, and Valeria Aquino, from Integration Officer from Immigrant Council of Ireland. So we're going to have these three speakers now talk about the area of how, I guess, the process of reporting, what happens, and how engagement happens within these organisations to support people who have been subjected to hate. We're going to have each of the speakers talk, and then we're going to open up around 3:15 for a Q&A session where we have a lot of participants who have asked questions. We'll get a few of them to ask them live, and also to answer their questions as well. Lucy. How's it going, Dr. Lucy Michael? Lucy and myself are friends, so she's also on mute. Lucy, you're on mute.
I was having trouble with slides. Excuse me a second. I'm going to continue without them because I don't think we need them. This chat is going beautifully today, Hazel. Thank you for hosting this, and thank you for having me. I really welcome the plans and policies that have been put in place by Garda Síochána. And I think, over the last number of years, we've seen some really incredible work by the diversity unit. And what the great pity, I think, is when that diversity unit was established back in the very early 2000s with some great practice, that simply wasn't expanded to the rest of the organisation. And so, I wish the best of luck to everybody involved in trying to do that expansion, because it's so crucial. What I'm going to talk to you about today is the iReport racist incident reporting system. So I started, I helped INR to set that up in 2013, and I've been analysing the data from that for the last 7 years. And so you very kindly quoted the data from this year's report that we launched on Tuesday. And of course, Sergeant Greene quoted the increase in reporting to the Gardaí that we noted in that. Aga is following me. She's going to talk about the system in depth and how people can use it and what it can achieve. I want to dig into some of the data from it, if you'll allow me to do that before Aga does the in-depth dive into the system. These reports, have been growing over the last 7 years. And what we saw this year was that there was 159 cases that I counted as criminal offences. Now, I have to say, I get asked about this a lot, about how do I count? I do have a legal background, and I have sought much expert advice in how we count criminal offences from Gardaí and others, and legal experts. And I am very conservative in the way that I count those. So that 159 criminal cases is cases involving offences, many times multiple offences, and it's a conservative estimate of that. There are, on top of that, another 100 or so that are incidents that I think should be recorded as racist incidents. And the other thing to say is that both in 2019 and in 2020, 64% of the criminal offences we counted included elements of repeat harassment. So repeat harassment is one thing that we've identified, particularly over the last 5 years, as an area where we really need practice to improve in Garda Síochána. It's a tricky thing. We know that dealing with repeat harassment involves a much more strategic approach and then trying to deal with individual incidents. But of course, repeat harassment are the types of incidents that cause the most fear amongst those targeted by them. So we did see an increase of 13% in reporting to Gardaí last year. That was up from 30% reporting of crimes the year before. And I think what's really notable in this is I always ask how many people are reporting crimes, things that are clearly crimes, rather than incidents overall, because people don't tend to report to Gardaí things that they know the Gardaí aren't going to do anything about. So if something isn't clearly a criminal offence, people generally won't go to the guards with it, or they might go to the guards to seek signposting to somewhere else. But even amongst those very serious crimes that involve very violent assaults, only 28% of people reported those in 2019, and the figure is similar in 2020. So those people who are suffering serious injury, hospitalisation and so on are still not reporting to Garda Síochána. And part of my job is to dig into the data and find out why. One of the things that also came up this year, I suppose, that was unusual was that we've tried to look, in the interest of being collaborative with Garda Síochána, we've tried to look for elements of good practice that have appeared over the years. And it was certainly, in this year, I saw two particularly good elements of good practice. In one case targeting a Black African Muslim family, Gardaí spoke to the perpetrator and advised the family to seek a court order if the harassment persisted. I have never seen that in the 7 years I analysed the data. That's the first time we've ever seen that kind of advice given to victims. The second one was a single incident of verbal abuse on someone's doorstep. Ordinarily, that's just dismissed completely in the iReport data. But in this case, Gardaí said they could actually charge the perpetrator with a public order offence and trespass with intent to cause fear. I have to tell you, I was amazed when I saw that. But my surprise somewhat diminished when I discovered that the victims were not Black or Muslim or any other person of colour. They were a professional white European family. So I would certainly, it's a single incident, but it's such an unusual one against a pattern where ordinarily people are telling us about the kinds of dismissals that they get in those kinds of cases, that I think that this kind of training that Assistant Commissioner Hilman and Sergeants Greene and Delaney have talked about, it really is helpful to us to know that the Gardaí are going to have the training so that we can start to understand, are there patterns of racism amongst serving Gardaí? Like all of us, all of us have discrimination, and it is highly likely that the Gardaí who are serving our communities do too, whether they realise it or not. The problem for us is that comes into everyday practice. The more, that I mentioned those two single incidents only because they were so surprising in the 2020 data. Let me give you a more usual picture from the iReport data. The satisfaction levels amongst people reporting to iReport, and yes, perhaps people who are more satisfied with Gardaí don't report to iReport, but consistently in the iReport data, less than a third of people are satisfied with the response they've got from the Gardaí when they've gone to report. And so back in 2018, Shane and I worked together on a submission to the Commission on the Future of Policing, and we laid out in there in 3 lengthy pages the many failings of An Garda Síochána to respond to racist incidents. So I use that as a bit of a checklist now to see, are we making any progress? And we are. Nonetheless, there are still some areas where which need attention. One of those is, and I see several people in the Q&A mentioning this, the refusal to record crimes in the first place. Not record them with a bias motive, but just to record them at all. So it's concerning that those patterns are still there. Again, this data is relatively small because of large-scale underreporting, so we don't know how big a pattern that is. It may well be that there is a wider pattern of satisfaction, but it's concerning that we do see these, because each of these cases is a victim that is not helped. Failing to attend the scene is still a problem, and the failure to collect evidence is still a problem. Failing to take statements from victims despite multiple visits to Garda stations is still a problem, and failing to communicate updates to victims is still a problem. I noticed that Delaney in the Q&A said that she just the other day, Gardaí said they wouldn't open a report. And again, that is a really common story coming through the 2020 iReport data. People are feeling very let down when they go to the Garda station and they don't get this response. And that's what I really want to focus on today, is not whether this is representative of a whole picture. I can only tell you what's representative of the data I have in front of me. But let me tell you about what's significant about that, is that ethnic minorities, migrants and other groups that are targeted by hate crime don't know whether when they go to a Garda station, they're going to get the Garda who is well trained, who's well versed in this, who understands the policies, or whether they're going to get somebody else. And the problem is that when they get somebody who isn't interested, who doesn't want to record, that goes around by word of mouth amongst victims. And it really undermines the trust in Gardaí overall. There are a couple of cases that have been of particular concern to me, and it's quite interesting because when I go and do public talks and so on, people very often come up to me and say, I reported to iReport and this is what I reported. So even though it's a confidential system, very often they do come and tell me afterwards that was them. And there are many cases where people have had to leave their homes because repeat harassment is so bad. There are, of course, as our Garda colleagues have said, cases where people are too scared to report to Gardaí, including, in the recent data, somebody whose house was threatened to be burned down, having been assaulted seriously. Another 2 Muslim teenagers who were assaulted repeatedly in their neighbourhood, and again, afraid to report to Gardaí. But a much more consistent pattern than that is people who are reporting regularly to Gardaí, but who aren't getting any satisfaction. And those cases are those of repeat harassment. So I really want to urge on Garda Síochána again, and I have put this in the report for the last number of years, and I know that Shane has raised it, but to really think about risk assessment for repeat harassment and to draw up a policy, perhaps similar to that of the domestic violence policy for repeat harassment. I did notice, and congratulations, in the Garda training plans, that risk assessment is one of those, and I'm delighted to see it. Congratulations on that. I think that will make a huge difference. But it's just to say that one of the problems we're seeing in the 2020 data is that uptick in hate speech by hate groups, and it's matched in the assault and repeat harassment data by groups who are undertaking repeat harassment in the same areas, the same groups, who are targeting ethnic minority and migrant groups and doing so repeatedly. So, our concerns about the extreme hate groups in the hate speech element of it are matched by that need for action on repeat harassment in the other areas. We have had a number of people just in the last few days, in fact, asking us about whether Garda diversity officers are available. Certainly we know that over time there has been difficulties with getting Garda diversity officers to be always available. We know that the shift patterns mitigate against that, particularly where there are too few trained in any particular areas. We understand all the practical issues with that, but for victims who are looking for a Garda diversity officer, it is a very simple thing to put a victim off reporting if that person's not available. So, that message needs to go out much more, that if you have to go through the diversity unit to get a report taken, then that message needs to be really clear from the start. It can't be something that you try and find out later on. The very last thing I want to leave you with, Hazel, today, is that apart from those reasons for not reporting, which were overwhelmingly for the last 3 years that people didn't believe Gardaí would do anything, two things have concerned me: racial profiling and immigration concerns. We've seen multiple cases where Gardaí have threatened people trying to report cases with checking their immigration status. That's very much of concern to me. It's not reassuring, I think, to any of us that there isn't legislation or policy in place that provides an immigration firewall. And I don't put that on Garda Síochána, I put that to the Department of Justice, that needs to be part of the new hate crime legislation. And Garda Síochána can only do so much. And so that's on the Department of Justice. And in terms of racial profiling, again, we've seen more incidences of racial profiling this year reported to iReport, and many more I know of that have not been reported to iReport that are of concern to me. The United Nations Committee on Elimination of Racial Discrimination advised the government in 2011 that they should introduce legislation outlawing racial profiling by police and other agencies, and they haven't done that, and they don't appear to intend to do that. So I really do welcome and congratulate on Garda Síochána's new initiatives. I hope that they get the support from the wider organisation that they need to see this through. Congratulations to everybody in the Diversity Forum for pushing on these much needed measures. But I hope I've given you an idea of the scale of the task that they are faced with, and I hope that we can give them our support in going forward.
Thank you, Lucy. And I think from hearing from the data and hearing from the suggestions that you're coming out with, that there's a huge element here of working together as well. So I'm delighted that it's actually yourselves, the Gardaí, and other various groups that have been here today, because I think every organisation have their different opinions and have their data and research built up, and there's a lot that can be worked on. But hearing your last 2 points, I think it was great that Geraldine, Sergeant Greene also addressed it, that if you are subjected to a crime or abuse or assault, that your immigration status should not be an issue. And if that is something that needs to be drawn up in policy, I really, it's something that I would call on the Minister of Justice, and I will write to her myself to ask whether we can make sure to have that, not just within COVID, outside COVID as well, because it is an ask that needs to be there. I'm going to bring in your colleague Aga Whisk in next, and then bring in Valeria. We only have 15 minutes left, so Aga, I'm very sorry that it'll be shorter than what I originally intended to provide you to speak on. So it'll be about 5 minutes or so. So off you go.
Okay. So I will go straight to the point. Hello, everyone. Okay, why my slides are not changing? Oh. Okay. Okay, so I will straight away go to the iReport.ie. So iReport.ie, you heard from Dr. Lucy Michael, is our flagship project and program, and entire system actually that we operate through iReport website. And I would like to ask everyone to go now to www.ireport.ie to have a look because I will be talking about a lot how to report, so I would like people to be able to see how iReport works. Alternatively, you can download ireport.ie Android or iPhone app.
Can I ask the moderators to put ireport.ie, the website, on the chat box, please, to all the participants so they can see it, just so that they know what Aga is talking about in terms of reporting racism incident. Okay, so they can see the slides. Sorry, Aga.
Okay.
So I can't see the slide here.
Yeah, okay. So the iReport is independent and confidential tool. So it's a bit different than reporting to the guards, because we are not linked to any other body, and the data that we get through ireport.ie are anonymized, and we don't pass them to any third party. So I think it's very important for people to know, because there is some expectation as well from people who are reporting to us that we will take on the case, we'll report to the guards, we'll report to Workplace Relations Commission, and so on. So just to let people know that this is not the case, okay? And it's a civil society tool, so anybody can report, can file a report to the system. Also, I will discuss ireport.ie reporting the reports of racism, which Lucy already touched on. So these are the reports that we produce based on the data from iReport. And also we have 42 iReport centers, which are organizations who committed to take iReports and support victims to take iReports through their organizations. And you can find all of it on our website. So this is, I will quickly explain to you how iReport works. iReport is actually, sometimes it's thought that iReport is only to report hate crime, but it's not. It's actually a system that allows you to report discrimination in any kind of setting, racist crime, racist hate speech, and it can be political hate speech in the media and online, far-right activity, graffiti. And you can report from any online-based device. I said we have an app and we have a website, so you can use either or, whichever you prefer. You can also upload videos, photos, podcasts, recordings, screenshots, any kind of file that you would like to supply us as a kind of evidential information. And then based on this, we anonymize the data and we publish it in a form of report and analysis as a research. We had annual reports. As you can see, they look like this, and the recent one was published just on Tuesday. And also we published one thematic report on Afrophobia in Ireland, and all of them can be accessed on our website as well. And then, it's Lucy already was talking about the importance of reporting, but I can't stress it enough how important it is, because people sometimes think that reporting means only, I will become a statistic. And that's not true, because, you actually contribute to policy changes. Because, for example, the fact that we work at the moment with the police, that we work with the legislators, is because we collect this data, because data speaks evidence. Because we have proof that racism exists in Ireland. We have proof of real people reporting real cases to us. And actually 50% of them, or even more, haven't been reported anywhere apart from ireport.ie. That's why it's so important for us to hear the voice of people affected by racism, to listen to them and try to form responses. And the data from iReport is shared with international bodies such as United Nations, ODIHR. We also share it with the government and politicians, policymakers, with the media, with the public, with community organizations, and with our network. So we can then form policies on local, national and international level, which I think is really, really important. So that's kind of how reporting of iReport works. I will quickly tell you as well that when you are on iReport site, it's quite straightforward. So you just go, you open the page or the app, then you will be asked to, click report racist incident, and you will have three kind of types of incidents to report, to choose from. So you have racist speech, crime, or discrimination or graffiti. And depending on which one you pick, which one fits your case, you will have a different set of questions. The longest is the questionnaire. It's a questionnaire form. And the longest one is the one when you report crime of discrimination, because there is a lot of detail there involved. But it's 14 questions long. And the one about graffiti or hate speech is much shorter. So as I said, you can upload different files as well. And your report is anonymous. You have an option to provide us with your details, but these details won't be shared with anyone. So even if you, for whatever reason, you are afraid to report to guards or to other bodies, you can be sure that your data is safe with us. And also because of confidentiality reasons, because of GDPR, we do not share your details with anyone else. And if you want to, unfortunately, we don't pass on the details, or we don't take your case and act on your behalf. So you have to do it yourself. And this was kind of a weakness that we recognized that iReport had, because we felt that people were coming to us, were reporting to us, and they were expecting some sort of action. And because we don't have capacity, many people doesn't know that we are actually only 2 people in INR. But we try to develop, some sort of response and support for people, so they can at least, so they are able to self-advocate, but also to understand how the system works and what are their rights and what are the supports available. And because of that, we developed Responding to Racism Guide, which I authored. And this is the publication. It's available. Here is the link, so you can access it online. And it's basically a publication where you have information on kind of everything we know about racism in Ireland, from understanding racism and defining it, and drawing kind of on the context of racism in Ireland, to practical responses, which kind of walks people through how to report hate crime, how to report hate speech, how to report racism in the media, how to report racist discrimination, and where as well, in areas such as housing, healthcare, schooling, universities, social welfare, direct provision, because there are it's very, very complicated for people to navigate that system. And we believe that the guidebook provides kind of step-by-step information, and also where people can go to get support. And also we provide quite clear paths for people what to do when they experience hate crime and when they experience discrimination, because from our experience, we see that people very often go to the guards with reports of discrimination, and as well how they are dealt in this situation kind of forms a disappointment with the police, because, for example, they are not informed that, sorry, this is not was actually discrimination, you should report it to Workplace Relations Commission. They are just being sent back. So I just would like to maybe stress it to the police as well, to inform people on the desk how to deal with reports of discrimination, racist discrimination, homophobic discrimination, and so on. Also, in the guide, you can find information on responding to racism in the community, and supports available for victims. So all the kind of supports organizations within our network and beyond. Additionally, we started developing a kind of putting the guide online in a form of a blog where you have clickable resources. And also we develop Responding to Racism training based on the guide. So this is kind of what is available in terms of reporting racist crime within the guide. So we have definition of hate crime and the law. So what are the kind of legislation, what legislation is used at the moment, because we still don't have hate crime legislation, but it doesn't mean that the hate crime is not covered by the law, because it's covered under a different kind of set of legislative measures. Then we kind of explain what people can expect in the reporting and investigation process. What are the victims' rights, including victims from ethnic minorities, and actually how they are protected by victims, kind of the legislation outlining how victims should be treated. And actually it's explicitly said that the guards shouldn't be asking people about their immigration status. So, but we know that they do, but this, so this should be definitely addressed. And also we say how to make complaints against the police. So if you feel that you've been mistreated, that you've been discriminated, we also outline what are the routes that you can take to make a complaint against the police. And another, so this is kind of in relation to crime. And another part that is important, I think, for victims of crime is the victim support part of the guide. So we describe there how the communities can form response to the rise of kind of violence, racist violence in their area, how to respond to incident in public as a bystander intervention, and how to do it safely. So we have a quite good resource there, and it's also in our blog. Then what are the specialist services available to people affected by racist crime, such as Immigrant Council Helpline, DORAS in Limerick, NASC in Cork, and other organizations that provide kind of support services for victims of discrimination at work, like for example Migrants' Rights Center, and other members within our network. So then we list victim support organizations that are specialists, kind of in the area of victim support, maybe not specialists in dealing with victim of hate crime, but they still can provide listening ear. And we also work with them to upskill them on dealings with victims of hate crime. We also provide links to legal support and advice, which is also not specific to victims of hate crime, but still people can get information on how to deal with kind of hate crime, and kind of where to access legal advice, what are the steps of in dealing with hate crime or discrimination, and so on. Also emotional support services. And what I think is really, really important, and is rarely mentioned, in the guide, we list organizations that are not organizations that are actually activist and voluntary groups, but we can't undermine kind of the importance of integration of people with local services. So we just through the guide, we wanted to provide the bridge as well with local activists, local groups that support refugees, that work on integration, interculturalism, where people can, who are very often very isolated by the incidents that they kind of experience, who might not have any family here, that they might link with people who at least will be kind of warm and welcoming to them, because this is really, really important to build a sense of the community. And we tried throughout the guide, we try to kind of make this bridge, and in each situation that arise, we try to provide relevant services to a person who might experience something, either where it was a crime or the discrimination case. So that's all. This is our contact details. So I hope that I fit in within 5 minutes. Probably I pass it a bit, but I would really encourage you to download the guide, to look at the iReport website, download the app, so you can, and even make a report, even because something that Lucy, I think, didn't mention, that you can report kind of, it doesn't have to be something that happened today. It can be something that happened even a year ago or 2 months ago or 2 weeks ago. So even if you saw something, if you heard something on the media, if you are concerned about something, just report it to us, please, because it's really, really important for us to have an evidence of what is going on, what is the kind of how racism looks in Ireland, and who are the victims. Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks a million, Aga. So this is what Aga was referring to, responding to racism guide. You can order it from INAR, and also the team at INAR are great, as you can see from today. So if you have any questions, please ask them. They are very much there to support people, and they have been for a long time. So thank you to Shane, Lucy, Aga for today. I'm going to move on now to our last speaker, Valeria. Valeria, again, apologies, I don't have as much time as I wanted to originally for you. We're going to bring Valeria in, and then we're going to bring in some live questions in. We have a lot of Q&As, and we have people asking some similar questions. So what we're going to do is bring in a few people to ask their questions live, and then we'll also try to answer the rest of them as we go on. And if we can't, they will all be through FAQ on the INAR website by the coming weeks. So without further ado, Valeria, from our Integration Officer from Immigrant Council of Ireland, thank you for coming. And I'm going to, Valeria sits with myself and Shane and Geraldine and Dermot on the Garda Diversity Forum as well. So it's great to see you again, Valeria. I'm going to kick you off now for 7 minutes, if that's okay. So.
Yes, no problem. Thank you very much for the invitation, first of everything. And also, like, I have the chance to listen to the morning session. It was really good. So thank you for organizing the whole event. It was really, really useful, really, really good. As you mentioned, like, I work for the Immigrant Council of Ireland. I'm an integration officer there. And since I started with the Immigrant Council of Ireland 3 years ago, I am the responsible for the anti-racist support service. The anti-racist support service provides one-to-one support to victims of racism. And this support can be information provision, can be referral or advice. It is a victim-centered approach service. The victim would tell me the way they want to be supported by us. So some of the victims would contact us and they just want some information on how to, for example, to report to the workplace relations, a case of discrimination, for example. Some of the victims would just want to talk. I had a lot of very long calls with people that they just want to share their experience. They don't have anybody anywhere to go to share and to be like, to feel comfortable on telling what happened. So we are there to listen to them, which is, it's very privileged for us to be able to provide this kind of service. Of course, not now with the COVID, with all the restriction, but before I was able as well to meet with them. So we could arrange for them to go to the office and we could meet them face to face. Of course, like if you live nearby our office that is in Dublin. This service, the anti-racist support service, it was a service that was created 10 years ago. And it was to start to fill gaps on victim support. And at the time, there was no service available where victims could go to find information or finding ways to report the incident. So the service was created to start to fill this gap. Now, like after 10 years, the gaps are still there. Like we still have gaps on supporting victims. Of course, now we have a lot more options on how they can support. Like we can see that a lot of progress was made by the guards as well. And in our as well, like this things in our was like established, like they are very key on reporting and on giving this platform for people to go through in a very easy way on reporting the incidents as well. But there are still some elements on supporting of victims that are still there to be worked on. The first, like we spoke a lot in the morning, it is the gap of legislation as well. Like, so a couple of incidents, they don't feel anywhere on the legislation. So they kind of are left behind. This is one of the big issues. Right now as well, we don't have like a standard procedure on how to support victims. So we have a lot of organizations doing this work on supporting, trying their best, but we don't guarantee to the victim to have the same level of service and the same kind of information wherever they go to find the information they need. So this is one of the issues as well. The lack of legal support and legal representation, it's one of the key elements that we are finding on our helpline right now. People are really, what can I say, like not happy not to have option to go through, to have like specialized legal advice and representation. For example, right now, if you go to the workplace relations and place a report there, you don't have to have a lawyer to go with you in the hearings, but you can be sure that the company, your employer, they would have a lawyer with them. And so it's not a fair fight for a victim to be in a hearing with the workplace relations by themselves when the employer can have like maybe 1, 2, 3 lawyers, depending on the organization. So this is something that it's coming up in our helpline a lot as well, the need of legal advice and representation. Another key point as well that we are really seeing the need, it is for the psychological support to victims. Like we know that that is mainstream services of mental health in Ireland. We know that we have a couple of organizations doing this work, but that is still some barriers, especially for victims, like for migrants, people that are not, the English is not their first language. For example, like for myself, like I arrived in Ireland in 2012, and it took a while for me to be confident to pick up a phone and talk to someone like in a really easy way, let me say that way. And especially to share something that is so traumatic, it is even harder for you to pick up a phone and saying what you want to say to that other person. So, and also like, as we mentioned today, like the lack of trust of the victims in the system, it is very visible in our services, and we can hear from our clients as well. Like just this week, I referred a person to report to the guards, and she wasn't happy at all. She didn't want to, and so you need to really encourage them to do, and you need to really enforce them that they have to try, and if they don't get the response they want, they have now the Garda diversity unity that they can refer to, that they have other ways to do, and we are there to support them. But I can see, like from especially the last year, that people are really tired, and you can see that we are talking to people that they're not the first time victims of racism and discrimination. It's been an ongoing thing in their lives, and they just don't want to deal anymore. And of course, this will affect reporting, like people would not want to go forward anymore. And so like to take care of the victims, I think we need to focus like this next couple of years on really providing the support that the victims needed, so they would feel comfortable to go forward and to report the cases in the future as well. We know as well that there are a lot of community organizations trying to fill that gap and offering support to victims, like rooted in Ireland and Africa, for example, or the Association of Brazilian Families, that they are trying within their own community to provide this support and connecting people, victims, to the services. But we know that this is not a very sustainable way of doing, especially because they are doing like completely with no funding at all, completely on voluntary basis with any support. So like, I think we need to build up the capacity of these community groups, because when you talk about trust, I think there is no better way of building trust with the community than engaging the community on the solution of the issue. So I think we need to be closer than we are right now with the community groups, and we need to include them as much as we can on the decision making. So what we are doing right now at the Migrant Council of Ireland, we are trying to build this national anti-racism support system, if you put that way. And we are trying to now contact a couple of key organizations and stakeholders to try to build up capacity for them to support victims within their own capacity and with their own speciality as well. And also, especially, I think, within the community groups, like trying to support them, how they can build their capacity, how they can be more sustainable, how they can strengthen their work within their community, that it's so important and so crucial for the victims right now. And so, like, I will not keep you here too much, so I would just like to finish talking a little bit about my own experience as a victim of racism myself. Like, I arrived in Ireland in 2012. I was victim of racism a couple of times and discrimination. At the first 2 years, I think it was very more light, and I took better. And it has a lot of microaggressions and things that are minor. But I think the one incident specifically really changed me. It was when I was pushed in the Lewis by a woman that she thought that because she had to leave the Lewis carriage before me because I wasn't born here in Ireland. And I remember that time like I was pregnant. And so I was in all the hormones in my head as well. And so it was really, really hard. Like it really affected my mental health. And like luckily, like during one of my prenatal appointments, the midwife, she noticed that I wasn't okay. I was sad, and she asked, "What's going on with you? Like, are you okay?" And so I think it was the chance I had to say, "No, I am not okay." And so she referred me to the social worker. And so I started to do some counseling sessions and everything. And so I built up my strength to really go forward and report, because up to that moment, like I didn't report any of the cases I was victim, because I felt so bad. And I felt as well, like I didn't want to keep repeating over and over again something that hurted me so much. And so like, I think look after the victims and look after their mental health. It is crucial for the future of fighting hate, racism, and discrimination as well. And I think that's it. I think this is my contribution for today. I don't want to keep you here too much.
Thank you, Valeria, and it was a wonderful contribution, and I'm really sorry that happened to you. And it's like, this is part of why we have these conversations. This is why we have Dermot, Geraldine, and all the panels here, and all the guests as well attending. Is like the more we can emphasize that this is a conversation to be had, that we do need to actually fight back on this, the better we are for it. Because I've been called all sorts of things this year, but a lot. The most frequent ones are about being a race baiter. If you report a hate crime and if you have suffered racism, you're not a race baiter. If anything, you are a survivor of racism and you are doing something about it. So on that, I'm going to move on to the Q&A session and bring in some of our audience to ask questions of our panelists. I won't be able to bring in everyone. I'm very sorry. I know there are hands up at the moment. Paul, Razu, Rastan, I see your hands up, and I think Alison had her hand up there for a second, but I do have some people who had asked to speak as well. So we're going to bring in Ken, who from earlier session to now session had a question for me about, I did do an interview with Hot Press and said, from the tragedy of George Shenko, I had said we need to do more and we need to do better, and that we need to try to figure out a way of working better as a community. And Ken had asked me earlier on and today and now as well on what do I mean by that. Well, part of what I mean is having a solution, be solution focused on what it is that it comes to hate crime and legislation, and how are we going to work with the department. But that's the enforcement part. What are we going to do in terms of the positive side of things? How are we going to work together in various communities? Ken, I'm going to bring you in because I know you had a question to pose to Assistant Commissioner Hilman, so I'm going to let you pose that directly to her, and you had other thoughts as well. I'm going to get you to keep it short though, because I do have a few other speakers who want to come in after you. So Ken?
Yep. Oh my God, hold on.
Ken?
Can you hear me?
I can indeed.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's Assistant Commissioner Hilman when she was working for the PSNI in Northern Ireland, actually policed hate crime. And I'm just wondering, I know she's connected to traffic as well, but what's the chances of having her full-time in community and specifically working with us in Blanchardstown to repair a lot of the fractures that happened after the fatal shooting of George Shenko? So if she could address that, I'd be very grateful for an answer. Thank you.
Assistant Commissioner.
Okay, Ken. Good afternoon. Good to talk to you. Yeah, thank you, Ken. Thanks for the question. Yes, just Ken's correct. For those who don't know, I didn't cover it in my introduction. As I said, I joined Garda Síochána in 2020. Prior to that, I have served for 35 years as a police officer in Northern Ireland. And from 2014 to 2016-17 as a superintendent. So it's what Michael Corbett is now for me, with me in Garda Síochána. As a superintendent, I was the hate crime lead for the Police Service of Northern Ireland. So I did a lot of work, Ken, in terms of hate crime policy. I did a lot of work. We could talk about lots here, Lord Mayor, we just don't have time. All that about victims, about restorative justice practices for hate crime. I oversaw the rewrite of the hate crime policy for PSNI. And that was at the time as well that Belfast was being reported as the hate crime capital of Europe, because it was for the first time that there was more racist hate crime reported than sectarian hate crime, which was quite a turn there. So yes, I do have experience in working in this, and I am very pleased to be able to work with my team now in Garda Síochána and actually share some of my experiences or what had happened when I learning from other jurisdictions, not just the Police Service of Northern Ireland. So yes, no, I'm the AC for rules policing and community engagement, but underneath that, Ken, I have great teams. So my role as the AC is to support my teams, give them the direction, the support, the equipment they need, the opportunities, and I do spend a lot of time in many areas, but in hate crime is one, and I think the team have hopefully feel that support that I give them in this area. But they're the people really working and enabling this to happen. We are committed to working with all groups. I know the group that you yourself are involved in, and we're just starting some other work in sport and soccer as well. With Andy George has also reached out to us about some work and some opportunities of what he can do. So I'm quite happy, Ken, that we can continue these conversations offline about some of the work. I know the team have been with you. We recognise, Lord Mayor, we're not going to talk about individual cases today, but Blanchardstown, I know the team are working with local guards there as well in terms of how we build that community cohesion, because that's where it starts. It starts at the preventative stage, and then because we're moving into the hate crime, that's when actually then we're seeing those lack of tolerant behaviour. So, Ken, more than happy we'll get something set up offline from this to finish these conversations. But certainly we are really looking forward to working with many groups as we are right across Ireland, and what fits local areas, because while we're doing a national strategy, I very much recognise it's not a one size fits all. So we really need to support those local Garda teams where you have perhaps groups of communities from certain areas. So while there's the generalist training, or there's training right across in Garda Síochána, we also want to do some higher level enhanced training where we are seeing perhaps spikes in hate crimes or signal crimes or hate incidents, because that's the important bit about recording hate incidents as well, where we're starting to pick up tensions in communities.
Just on the training. Sorry, thanks, Lord Mayor. I've also mentioned the fact that negative unconscious bias is very evident, particularly after the incident I mentioned. How can that be incorporated into the training of the guards? That's a very fundamental thing, because if you have negative unconscious bias, it will come to the surface when it comes in contact with xenophobia, for example, and racism.
Certainly, and I think it's something as a society, each and every one of us need to challenge ourselves about unconscious bias. And I think, as a police service, whichever police service I worked in, we're all a microcosm of society, and with that brings, people with different views. But actually, as a police service, our role is to keep everyone safe. Our role is not to judge anyone from whatever background or whatever characteristic. Our role, independently, I'm very clear in that, is to keep everyone safe, to support victims, to thoroughly investigate offences when reported, and work with partners to prevent crimes and build a cohesive, safe society. So, we do look at that. Geraldine, do you want to, or I'm not sure Geraldine's still on, but in terms of the training, we look at things like that. Geraldine, do you want to add anything about the training from that perspective?
Yeah, we do. Our second module of our training is on diversity and cultural awareness, and there's a full section in that on unconscious bias. Also, myself and Dermot just finished developing a module on hate crime and unconscious bias for the trainees in the college, so they'll receive that before they leave. And I saw a few questions on that, so I thought I'd just address that. There's a full section on it, and that's something that we're very aware of, that challenging ourselves, leaving our thoughts about anything like that at home. Don't bring it into work with us, and that's something that we're going to highlight very strongly in that whole module on cultural awareness and diversity.
Okay.
Thank you, Geraldine. Thanks, Ken, and thanks, Paula. Thank you, folks. I'm going to move on to the next speaker. I know it's, I was thinking Mina or Jen there. Mina Choi.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can.
Yeah, so thanks, Lord Mayor, for having me on. I was a victim of a hate crime on Tuesday, just on Henry Street, just beside the Spire. I was walking back from getting a takeout, and I was heckled and harassed by about 10 to 12, 15 to 17-year-old lads. And they said, maybe chink, Chinese, they hissed, harassed me. And when I said fuck off, they hit me. They circled me. They threw a rubbish bag at my head twice. I still have bruises, stings on my body. My ankle is swollen. So I was quite in shock. They ran off after a while. I had a walking stick. And the reason I have a walking stick is that I ran into these lads before, and they have harassed me physically before. And so when I go out at night, I just take a walking stick in case. And luckily I had that, and I swung it around, and they were taking photos and videos of me with their mobile phone. They continued to call me a chink Chinese, hissing. One of them even said a dog after me. And then they ran off. And then I was really traumatized, and I didn't know what to do. I just started walking, and then I realized I better call the guards. And then I was scared in case they came back. So I stopped some people and asked them to wait with me until I called the guards. And I think what was really disappointing was when the guard showed up, she basically spent more time trying to explain to me why there was no use making a case because they were underage. And that, should she really take this down? And then she kept asking leading questions like, were you really assaulted? And I said, what? Like, why would I lie? I even pointed to the garbage bags that were right in the middle of Henry Street and said, will you take a photograph? She didn't. I was in shock, so I didn't. She made no motion to take, stock of any evidence. And then she asked me to show up the next day at 7 p.m. at the Store Street station to make a statement, and which I did, but I had to take somebody along because I was shocked, and it was night, and I just didn't want to be attacked again. And when I was making these statements at the station, she again tried to make light of the fact that it was an assault. And she said, were you even hit? And I said, I told you I was hit. I was hit 4 or 5 times by their hand or foot. I don't even know. They were circling me. They treated me like a circus animal. They ganged up on me. They tossed rubbish bags. You saw the rubbish bags. And then she basically said none of the cameras were pointed in that direction. It's going to be really hard to ID these kids. And, are we really going to bother? I mean, that was her implication. And luckily I had a barrister friend there with me who just, calmly sort of proceeded and just, said, can you please read the statement back to us that you've written down? And he would correct it, because she continued to try to leave certain elements out. She's like, oh, so only one boy said chink to you. Is that right? Did they say chink? You sure you heard that right? And I was like, why would I make this up? Why would I make this up?
I'm so sorry to hear, and I hope you're okay.
Experience, but I speak English. I am documented. I have 4 or 5 hours to pursue this issue. I have resources. I can get a friend to walk me or drive me. There are a lot of people on the streets of Capel Streets, Talbot Street, who are working there, who do not have these resources. They don't have the linguistic, the language resources. A lot of the Asians, Lord Mayor, have a very bad relationship with law enforcement because of the countries they might come from. And I really think, given the response I got that I just, so many crimes are being unreported, undocumented. And I actually told the guards, I said, if I ran into these boys, this is the second, third time. And if should they see me again, they're really going to kill me. And I said, are you going to wait until I have, my head is bashed in on the pavement and they stomp 12 of them on my head and I'm hospitalized and maybe unconscious before you do something? And perhaps even then they won't do anything. It really, really disheartened me. I just would like to say that.
Oh, thank you, Mina, for coming on and for telling us your experience. And I'm very, very sorry for what happened to you. I have Sergeant Geraldine Greene here, I think, who would like to address what has happened. So I'm going to pass you over to her.
Thank you. Mina, we're so sorry to hear about that experience. And I know you've contacted our office and we will make contact with you directly. You've left your contact details, and I know we were out of the office today with preparing for this, but otherwise we would have been there. But we will contact you directly and we'll follow through with this and make sure that you get the service that you need.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mina, and thank you, Geraldine, for being so upfront about it. And I think this is where we'll move on to the next speaker. And this is why I kind of wanted to have these sessions as well, because I know the guards are trying their best and trying to tackle the issues, but I know also there is a lot that not quite falling through the gap, but there's a good bit of disconnect of what happens, and having sessions like this may help us to try to unite a bit more and try to connect up between the gaps, and hopefully, Mina, you will get the support that you asked for. So I'm going to move on to the next speaker, but I also I have a question in about, I know Assistant Commissioner, you're going soon, but I have a question about diversity unit and can it be given more resources and clout. I actually also have another question asking whether there could be a specific person, Garda, that would be given the weight. I guess they're talking about you, but in a much more public role almost, to be seen as the person that will tackle these issues. But there is the question of whether more resources or clout will be put behind it. Before you go, do you mind letting us know if that can happen?
No, thank you for the opportunity. And yes, sorry, because we are, as you know, we're running slightly late, and I do apologise, but I did have an urgent appointment that was in my diary before this, but I wanted to come today and be with you today, and it was really important for me to do that. I think there's a couple of things there. I think at the minute, with the resourcing for the unit, I will continue to look at the resource we have. But what I also want to get for a success for me is that actually this is a thread that goes right across policing. It's not solely the diversity unit is the specialism, but actually the awareness is that every Garda member, once they complete their training, has that awareness. They understand what a hate crime is. They understand exactly what Geraldine referred to about the impact of hate crime on not just the individual victim, but actually the whole community that they represent, because it is individual Garda members who will be out on the ground engaging with victims when they report crime at the time it's reported, and as we've heard about one of those incidents today. So we are an enabler, and our role is to share that and cascade that right across in Garda Síochána, and that's what we're committed to do. I very much am, and the team, if you think our profile, then we are looking at and have engaged with the Diversity Forum about what do our communication strategies look like? How are we going to go out? And we're actually planning that. We're planning some external outreach. But I even think with that, for me, while it's important that we're there, more importantly with the outreach and the communication we're doing, that is that you are standing alongside us, because there's no more powerful voices. Yeah, I can say, and I will continue to say, to stop it, report it. Hate crime's not acceptable. Please report it. But you're the people with great influence right across the community. And that's one thing I would say today. There's a lot of data there. People are talking about data. That data has not transferred itself to our systems. And if any of you can encourage anyone to report a hate crime, in the first instance, if they do want to talk to the diversity officer, who will then forward it to the local Garda station. But anything you can do to support and encourage people. to do that, we would really welcome that. And that's what we want to do. We've already had initial conversations with the Diversity Forum that while we ourselves would be involved in this, others, we're going to ask our partner agencies that you saw across the forum. I saw one of the slides is, and yes, there are traveller groups represented on the Diversity Forum. There's one group that we have a regular group meeting with travellers, the Travellers Advisory Group, and they themselves then nominated who they would want to be represented on the forum. And we will use all groups across all the representatives to encourage that report, because it should be victim-led. You know, we need to, because not every victim wants a criminal justice outcome, and I think that's really important. It's about putting those supports in place, and you know, we did hear about it, and you know, for next year, perhaps working with our victim support agencies, what do our victim supports show? And that's just not sitting within Garda Síochána, it's sitting right across society of how we can work to support victims, whether that's victims who go into a criminal justice case, or victims who we look at restorative justice practices, because for some victims that's actually what they would prefer, is to sit and talk with the perpetrator and understand the impact of the behaviour, especially when we're talking about hate incidents which don't reach a criminal threshold. So I think that's, so in terms of the unit, you know, there is great support. I think they know they have great support and an advocate in themselves with their own assistant commissioner. If I do feel we need that, we will continue. I will look at that. I have other resources that we can transfer internally, but really we need to start looking at how we can cascade that. And I think it's important to say as well, the diversity officers, that's a portfolio role. I don't want people to be mistaken that this is the only job that the Garda members do. They will mostly be community policing guards, whose role is to work in partnership, whose role is to work with communities, but they will also perhaps, when required, provide that additional support to victims in addition to the investigating Garda member. So those Garda diversity officers are operational Garda members who will then get enhanced training in this area. And you know, that was a really good piece of work we've done to see where they are spread right across the divisions. We're going to look at this where we need to do additional training. We're going to look at it under our new system, our new model when we move to 19 divisions, to see, we've plotted them what that will look like and to prepare for our changes. So how our office, the national office, supports them. You know, if we were out of COVID, you know, do quarterly meetings, you know, yearly CPD events, all the things that we could be doing based on the feedback we're receiving from yourselves. So I think that's... Can
there be more diversity in the Garda unit? Because that's one of the common questions coming through at the moment. Can there be more diversity within the force itself as well? Or do you think that will be coming or not?
No, it's a really good question. And, you know, somebody also, you know, I said we're a learning organisation. I was looking at the question. Somebody made a comment on the photograph we put up there today. And, you know, they made a really valid point about the absence of diversity in that photograph. We recognise, and thank you for the opportunity to answer this question as well, Lord Mayor. It's an important question. It was the one that was raised earlier about our own organisation and Garda Síochána. So we recognise, you know, if we look at the last figures of what we know, about 17-18% of the population in Ireland are non-white Irish. So in terms of diversity in our communities, how does that transfer to Garda Síochána? And we recognise, you know, I know from the previous organisation I worked in as well, about the work that was done to ensure that the Police Service of Northern Ireland is and continues. There's still work to be done, but the work was done to ensure it was representative of the community that it serves. And again, for us, we are committed to ensure we're representative of the community that we serve here in Ireland. And with that, we have our own the strategy we talked about today is the external, really the hate crime strategy, but we have our own equality, diversion and inclusion strategy, which relates to ourselves internally and how we challenge our thinking and how we look at how to recruit, Lord Mayor. So there is work being done right across that arena in terms of when we start to recruit again, what outreach do we do? How do we reach out to those groups? How do we encourage people from all diverse groups right across society to apply? some of
Paula,
the
do you mind me asking, is it, I'm going to keep this to the last bit because I know you
Okay.
have to go. Like, I had heard a rumor that it was only 3 that was in the diversity unit at the moment. Is that true? Is it that low a number? Can we have more, or is there more in it? And I misheard.
No, I'll come back to the diversity unit. If I could maybe just finish this bit about representation, and I'll certainly come back to the diversity unit. Just in terms of then representation, because you can all assist with this, we've recently amended our uniform guidance to ensure that we can be more open for those for minority groups in terms of uniform and what some people may their religious beliefs and what. So, for example, we have our first member as a member of the Garda Reserve. We are looking at internships, so how we can reach out to schools and young people to recruit and bring people into Garda Síochána. But it's not also just bringing people in, because you can be diverse without being inclusive. It's not about ticking the box and ticking the box. It's about having an inclusive society, or having an inclusive police service, or inclusive working environment for anyone. So it is important that we actually get feedback from those representative groups within Garda Síochána about how they feel, how they feel, what we can do in terms of ensuring that they are part of our workforce, whether that's Garda members full-time, Garda Reserve, or Garda staff. So there is certainly reaching out about diversity in recruitment. Back to then your question, Lord Mayor, in terms of the diversity unit, you are correct, but they're also, as I say, that is the full-time members. They are supported by, and our role is how we reach that policy right across in Garda Síochána. So, the day-to-day work about diversity in local communities will be delivered by the local policing teams, by the community policing teams, by the diversity officers out in divisions. Superintendent Corbett oversees that and other portfolios. So I think, if I feel that is required, but at the moment, we need to look at the work we have delivered. I think we've delivered a lot of work. We can move people if I feel temporarily, but I'm content at the minute that the work the team are doing is delivering on the objectives of what we need in terms of that diversity strategy, Lord Mayor. And but the important thing, I think, is what is our internal collaborative working. So we do partnership externally very well, but actually how internally do we work with other people right across the organisation? Because there's other people. That's what we need. We just can't, because if we have this down to a very few people who will be the spectrum, but sharing that expertise, whether it's protective services and the work we do in that field, community policing, roads policing, every interaction we have with the public should be based on those principles of respect and equality.
Thank you so much, Paula. I know you have to go. So Assistant Commissioner Paula Hilman, who has been very, very good, actually, since she started. And in my term, she has, to that question by someone saying, can we have a kind of a figurehead? I think you're pretty much it at the moment, Paula, until you don't be it anymore. So thank you so much for your time. I'm going to let you go, but I have some more questions from people for Geraldine and Dermot and Michael.
Yeah, so listen, folks, if I just say, so thank you. As I say, I did have this, it's now 4 o'clock, so I did have something else. It's not through lack of interest here. It was very, very important for me to be here today. I know Michael and the team will update me on all that happens as I leave now, but please do keep talking to us. Give us, feedback. I said at the outset, we are a listening organisation. We want to do the best for victims. We want victims to have confidence to report to us, know how to report, and then we provide the best service to victims of hate crime. So thank you for working with us, and please, we're on a journey, and let's this work continue. And Lord Mayor, again, thank you very, very much for the opportunity to be here today as well.
Thank you, Assistant Commissioner. Thank you. I'm going to bring in, it's now coming close to 4 and we're going to close shortly. So I'll bring in 2 more speakers, live speakers, and then we will close this session. So the next speaker we have is Tabani. Oh, he's gone. Okay. Tian, are you there still?
Hi.
Hi. Hi.
How are you? I'm just about to go as well. I have
Sorry.
another meeting at 4 o'clock, but is there anything you want me to comment on?
No, you had a question there. That's why we were bringing you in for
Oh
your
yeah,
question.
in relation to the young people who seem to be a lot of the offenders in the a lot of the racially motivated assault situation. Ms. Tran there seemed to be saying the kids were teenagers. I know my friend Shelley was attacked by teenagers, and I was at a meeting, online meeting with some Asians in the UK, and they were talking about similar situation where most of the attacks seem to be caused or carried out by teenagers. So it seems to be a common theme that everybody is experiencing. So I'm just wondering if there's anything can be done. That's all. Thanks.
I'm gonna thank you, Ten. I'm sorry for taking so long. So I'm gonna pose that to Geraldine. Would you?
Yeah, I think that it seems to be very common, and especially during COVID. You know, we have a lot of young people are bored, and especially when they were out of school. Look, we will take a report whether it's been instigated by a teenager or an adult. We will still take the report. It will be then how it will be dealt with, whether it's through the youth diversion programme or normally as an adult, if it's an adult. And Dermot touched on earlier that importance of you know, sport, about that community engagement, about getting out there into communities and spreading that message through communities. And also we've revised, not our office, but within the Bureau, the schools programme. There's a full new schools programme being delivered with a new diversity section and a whole new element on bias, discrimination, and about impact of crime and hate crime on people. So that's something that we welcome and that will go out into schools now for all ages. I think I'm not 100% sure on the delivery date, but definitely it's complete. I think we were waiting for the Department of Justice or the Department of Education, sorry, to just authorise that. But that's definitely going ahead, and we do. It is a lot of young people we do see involved in these type of crimes, and that is a very unfortunate thing.
On the balance side, though, because I'm very conscious that with COVID, it's hit so many of us so hard, and including in that demographic, it's young people that it's hit really hard as well. So on one side, I know there are issues and that Ten and other people have said, but on the other, I would like to point out that a lot of young people have done so much good during this period and have done has been a credit to themselves and their family. So there's an argument on always to be had on both cases. I'm going to bring in the last speaker, which is Owen, and then we'll go wrap up this session. So Owen, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you for having me speak here. I just wanted to raise a question in relation to the training that you mentioned on the hate crime. One, what would you do if a member of on Garda Síochána they refuse to take the training? And two, what would you do if there is an incident of racism or hate in general reported to the Garda? A member of the public reports it, saying that a Garda has, committed a hate offence against them, or a member of the Garda says that another member of the Garda has committed a hate offence towards them.
Okay, thank you, Owen. I'm going to bring Geraldine in again, and she had a few other points as well to other questions that got raised that she might want to go through. Yeah,
there's a few different elements there, Owen. Obviously, anything internal disciplinary, we deal with it, whether it's what you're talking about or not. We have if it's against a member, we have our bullying and harassment policy. It will be dealt with that way. In terms of the training, look, that's a matter for management, but it will be mandatory for everybody to undergo the training. And we've just had other training at the moment where every member had to undertake a significant amount of training, and there's a checks and balance in place there with the Garda College that we all undertake it, and that's a matter then for local management to manage it. But I can assure you that we'll certainly be pushing for that to be enforced, in that everybody will undergo this training.
Okay.
Yeah, just on a few of the other points, and I think there was a few questions similar. Any Garda can take a report of a hate crime. There's not a category for hate crime. a base offence that has a discriminatory motive. So there's nothing to stop any Garda from taking a report of a hate crime. And then in relation to repeat offending and repeat victimisation, our changes to our pulse system that happened late last year enable us now to see if there's a hate motive attached to any incident, crime or non-crime. So those low-level, maybe low-level harassment issues that people are talking about them not being followed up or not being taken seriously, they're being identified now to us at the National Office. On a daily basis, we can see them. We can see if there's repeat offending, we can see repeat victimisation. We can also see if there's tensions in a particular area because of that kind of behaviour. So that those additions that came in October are a huge benefit to us to see what that picture is in relation to hate crime. In relation to the GDOs, they're going to receive priority training, and also the review that the Assistant Commissioner talked about. We were able to identify the divisions in the country where there's gaps, and Blanchardstown is one of them, and Ken, I know, raised those concerns. They're top of our list for training, also Balbriggan, top of our list for training. Another thing I think about I think I've touched on the rest. Yes, I touched on the other ones in relation to the bias, unconscious bias, which is a huge part of the cultural awareness training module, and the training that we have ready for delivery to the trainees in the Garda College.
And Geraldine, in relation to racial profiling that Dr. Lucy Michael brought up, would that be addressed, or how would that? Okay.
Absolutely. Okay. That's part of that.
Okay, thank you so much to Garda Síochána. I'm also going to say, just wrap up on a few things. There's a lot of questions and a lot of hands. Apologies for not getting through all of them. I see Cormac has a big CAPS question on online hate crime. No, we haven't even touched on that, because that's a entirely not separate. It's part of it, but it's just such a big topic. It is something that I'm hoping before my end of term that we will actually be talking and have another session about, because I know from working with Twitter in the last couple of months on online abuse that they were keen to come in on a session, and I would like the other tech companies to come in to answer some of the pertinent questions on what is being done in relation to online abuse. I know my colleague Councillor Alison Gillinan has stated there that there seems to be very good conversation happening, but there does seem to be a disconnect between the reported data and then on how victims feel is being taken as a report, or what has constituted a report and what is being done. So that is, again, those kind of gaps we need to address, and the Guards are here today to say there are systems in place that are trying to improve the overall process as well. So I would say to the audience, thank you so much for participating. We will try to answer all your questions and put them online on INAR. And if there's anything specific you want to ask me, it's lordmayor@dublincity.ie. That's lordmayor@dublincity.ie. And if you have any question for the Guards, Garda Geraldine Greene and Garda Dermot Delaney has been sitting on the Garda Diversity National Diversity Forum, and they will be answering any questions as well. You can send them to me. I will meet them at the National Garda Diversity Forum, and I can convey the questions then. I said earlier on that the reports and INAR was due to all the great staff there, and it is, but there was also a whole list of members I just discovered that has been a part of members of INAR that has been essential and crucial to delivering what they deliver, and there's a whole list of them within the guide, the Immigrant Council being one of them, along with a load of others. So thank you so much for all your work, and thank you so much to our audience. And again, I guess keep safe and let us know if there's anything we can help with, and we will see you all again soon. Thank you.